Hello. Just checking this is working. If anyone who's online can give me a wee thumbs up and double check that you can hear me. Perfect. This is great. What a day.
Perfect. This is great. What a day. Perfect. This is great. What a day. Perfect. This is great.
Here we go. How do I change that?
How do I change that? How do I change that? How do I change that?
Oh, 1 second, let me just. Now, is that maybe a bit better? Hopefully, you can hear me and this is going all right. Again, if anyone can comment or let me know, that would be great. I'll just put the wee muffler thing on this pop. Perfect. Okay, great. Well, I'm gonna take a chance on this is working okay now. If anyone could confirm that for me, that would be amazing. But yes, I don't want to delay starting too much. Maybe wait 1 more minute. And I'll just perfect. I've got a like. The like hopefully is saying this that the sound is working okay. So I'll start into some of the really light stuff just in these initial minutes. I know obviously it does take a second for sometimes people to get online and get joining. And so I suppose the biggest thing about sustainability and why would you change the way you're already running your business? Why would you change that if there wasn't a reason? So, like most things, we should probably start with why. If we look at the markets or like a kind of a high level overview of what's going on elsewhere, maybe with our supply chains or the companies that we supply into, across Europe, from January 2024, is coming in the CSRD. That's a new directive that will hold companies to a much higher standard in terms of carbon reporting. Essentially, bringing carbon reporting to the stage that financial reporting is eventually, which is obviously they're worlds apart at the minute. Although, if you think about a business, I can't imagine a business that doesn't know their numbers in terms of their finances. So I suppose it is reasonable to assume that at some point we'll get to that level of understanding our carbon footprint and our impact on emissions and things like that. We also have examples from the S&P 500. So high 90%, I think it's like 96% of the S&P 500 have all got sustainability regulations within the company. So those are representing some of the biggest brands across the US. This is something that's obviously a high priority for stakeholders. It's a high priority for the board, and therefore it has to be a high priority for the business as well. So there is a lot more businesses that have decided to implement this sustainability. And then in terms of sustainability is often kind of goes hand in hand with carbon management. We talk about carbon a lot. When we talk about carbon, we don't literally mean the molecule carbon. It's the shortened way of saying carbon dioxide, the greenhouse gas. And the reason that we use carbon in conversation and it comes down to just carbon is because all of the other greenhouse gases are actually measured in carbon equivalents. So sorry, I'm going to take 1 second. I'm going to pause to text someone who I know is on the call just to make sure this volume is working okay. Mal, if you're on, I'm texting you. I think you are. Perfect. Great. Thank you so much. I'll put that back on airplane mode. So we talk about carbon because all the other greenhouse gases are measured in carbon equivalents. So, for example, nitrous oxide is nearly 300 times more potent than than carbon dioxide. Methane, for example, is 30 times more potent, but whereas carbon has a lifespan of about 100 years, methane has a lifespan in the atmosphere of about 30 years. So they are different. And it is important to realize those differences, but whenever we're conversing about it, in order to not make it gate kept, carbon and carbon equivalents are what we talk about. So on that note, the SBTI is the Science Based Targets Initiative based on the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, and over 4,000 companies have signed up to that. That represents 1/3 of the global economy. So even if you're a small business, and this sounds really, really high level and can't really relate to it, or you're not really sure where it applies to you, it applies to you in the sense that if everyone else is doing this, you have to keep up. You have to know what's happening, and perhaps some of it will be more relevant than others in application for your business. But knowing about it is definitely great, and I really do congratulate and thank everyone for being on the call today, for making time to watch this on catch up and or replay on YouTube here. But yeah, so it would be damaging to your business to not take action on it and not invest time and energy in understanding what is actually going on. So today in this webinar, I'm planning to cover some tips and tricks, examples of application, talking about other businesses that have done it. And yeah, I think before I really get into that though, I just need to explain, I am Stephanie. I'm the founder of Farm and Carbon, and what we do at Farm and Carbon is bridge the gap between sustainable farming practices and businesses that want local environmental impact projects. As well as that, I also do consultancy for clients, business clients, in terms of understanding sustainability, how to go about implementing a sustainability strategy. What does sustainability mean for them? I think that's something that's really important to take away from this. Like, what sustainability means to you and to the person hypothetically next to you could be totally different, because for one of you, your emissions hotspot could be within the fact that your windows are single glaze, or that your factory's really efficient, or your machinery is really old, or it could be that you've all the high tech stuff but your employees don't know how to use it. So there could be, what it means to any business can change and can vary. So I do also do consultancy. And I think that sustainability is somewhat gatekept by the big companies who've made it really complicated with standards and targets. And some people don't know this, but there's over 600 sustainability initiatives, bodies, authorities, standards, targets. Like, there's all of these, over 600. That is insane. Like, how is anyone supposed to know how to navigate this when there are options of 600 to go down the route? I will mention a few times SBTI. That is because it is quickly becoming the most important, because whereas a lot of them are guidance, they're voluntary, opt-in, SBTI isn't. As in, you don't just like join up and be like, oh, we're a member, we pay our membership. Like, you join up, you set targets, they're science-based targets, you have to deliver on them or you forfeit the commitment. So it is fast becoming one of the most important ones. But I do think it's really important, and I was hoping that I'd have small businesses, medium-sized businesses on this call to kind of highlight this. While the sustainability movement, if we want to call it that, is being a little bit gatekept in terms of those targets and standards, what small businesses are missing is just the ability to know how to talk about it. So, for example, there's a farm shop near me. They're fantastic corners in Cumber. It's actually not even that near me, but I really like them. And whenever he basically he sells the produce from his own farm, sells the produce from the farms around him, and then goes to the market to buy other stock to fill the shop whenever it's not available. And he's not buying the apples from South Africa whenever he has apples from 2 fields over. And that is essentially what some of the big companies would really congratulate themselves for that like local focus and minimizing waste in the supply chain and things like that. But like a lot of small businesses, we can't afford to operate any other way. We are efficient by nature, and it's about being able to communicate that through. So I really want to help you to outline, understand, and improve your sustainability to make the most of this opportunity that is sustainability. Um, some of what we're going to cover is really high level, but I just think that I wanted to cover lots of different things, and then you can take from it what you need in a sort of way, and how to communicate how sustainable you are. So, reasons why this is becoming more important as well. I'll just quickly cover. The retailers have recently launched a thing called the Net Zero, or no, the Retailers Net Zero Collaborative Action Plan, which is going to hold all of the supply chains for Marks and Spencers, Waitrose, Tesco's, Asda, Sainsbury's. There's 9 of them in total. They're all national supermarkets. They're holding their supply chain to account through this commitment. Then we have the likes of the NHS that has just changed their procurement standards, so they can only buy contracts of a certain value from suppliers that have environmental impact embedded into their organization. That has long time been the standard of the Department of Defense or Ministry of Defense, because they own so much land. So they have always had a focus on environmental standards. And then things like the Education Authority, they're starting to look at it more and more as well, because their main focus is children. The biggest stakeholder for the Education Authority is children. So they're thinking about the future, they're thinking about the long term kind of growth. So obviously, this is becoming more important in terms of big blue chip companies, and it's becoming more important for the public procurement, the public purse, and public expenditure. And then we also have organizations like Ground M. They're one of the biggest advertisers in the UK. And the way that the SBTI works, the near term targets take us up to 2030. And from 2030 onwards, every company that's in the SBTI is judged on their supply chain, including so their own operations and the supply chain. And Ground M has decided that they will not be working with any clients who are not completely on board with carbon management, regular reporting, sustainability embedded in the business, and their 50% reduction on their scope 1 and 2 emissions in line with SBTI. So essentially, they're SBTI committed, and they won't work with any clients that aren't, which is incredibly, it's an incredibly strong stance for them as an advertiser, because it's telling their supply chain, get accredited now or you won't be with us. But also, because they're one of the largest, they can really afford to do this, because whenever they do, it will be so not prestige, because it will become normal, but it'll be and I don't want to use the term virtue signaling, because it insinuates that there's something negative about this. I think it's incredible that they're doing it, but it also will put them apart. Any ads that are advertised with Ground M will be in line with a greener future, which is fantastic for both the advertiser and the client. But yeah, so you can only pioneer once. I think that's another really main thing that we sort of glaze over. There's no point in waiting till the market changes and then catching up. Like, what we can do is just get ahead of that. So as I outlined in most of the marketing information for this, the idea of the seminar is just to run through practical tips, advice, and conversation around 5 core points. So those 5 things are energy and energy efficiency, green procurement, testing my memory now, water, protecting our water conservation, and then also logistics and transport, and finally employee engagement. So these are all as important as one another. Some of them have quite immediate financial incentives, I suppose. And I think that that's probably why we're going to start with energy. So a big benefit of reducing your energy usage to become more efficient is that you'll be reducing your operational costs. Over the last couple of years, I think since COVID, and COVID kind of happened, and then we've sort of been existing in a disrupted market ever since. But one of the things that had become very clear, whenever the Ukraine war started, was how volatile our energy supply chain was. So while COVID might have highlighted the volatility of other things, the energy insecurity that we face became more prevalent whenever the Ukraine war began. So in terms of energy efficiency in your building, though, so if we think about like your equipment, how energy efficient is your factory equipment or manufacturing equipment? Those are like the big things that might come to mind. But a client of ours actually had changed out all of their monitors. They changed all of their monitors because they bought brand new monitors for everyone to work from home at the beginning of COVID. They just adapted quite quickly, and I said to them, because I'd seen the monitors that were sitting on the desks, and I was like, "What kind of monitors did you get?" And they said that these slimline ones, and I asked for the spec of them. They'd actually inadvertently reduced the energy usage, not their energy bill, because they were gifting them to the people, not gifting them, but they were giving them as equipment to work from home. But the reduction was 72%. The new monitors were 72% more efficient. Imagine if they had have made that decision a year earlier, but in the office. They could have reduced the amount that they're spending on that electricity bill. And obviously that does require upfront investment, and we'll get to it in a second, but you'd want to work out what are the least efficient parts of your business in this sense, and where are your energy hotspots, and where can you upgrade where it's going to need upgraded anyway. It's like planned maintenance, but as a add-on effect, you'll be reducing your energy bills. Another thing that is often highlighted, and it's so simple that I feel like we overlook it, is LED lights. Just looking at your lighting, especially if you have an office that has the tubular lighting, some of that fluorescent lighting can be super inefficient. So looking at options for your lighting is a no-brainer. And even though it's incentivized, I know it's incentivized here in Northern Ireland. I'm sure that it's incentivized across the UK in some ways, but I'm not totally sure beyond that, to be totally honest. But even if it's not incentivized, I've worked with businesses that have just looked at the price, looked at the energy use, looked at the efficiency, and said, we don't need you to apply for the grant. We could just do this because it pays itself off in 2 years. Or less, or however long, obviously you can do those figures. Another option would be renewable options on site. So looking at how you could integrate renewable options. So renewable energy includes solar panels, includes wind turbines. If you're close in proximity to water, it might include some sort of river or water turbines. Or it could also be looking at renewable energy packages and renewable energy tariffs with your local provider. If you're an organization that bids for public procurement or is in the supply chain of those blue chip organizations, that it is becoming more and more apparent that you need to demonstrate your environmental impact. Changing to a renewable tariff might be slightly more expensive sometimes, but it reduces your scope 2 emissions to 0. So it could be a really, really good way for you to reduce your environmental impact by quite a notable percentage, so that you would be able to outline to your tenders or anything that this is what you're doing and this is how much you've reduced it by, which is obviously really, really valuable. Renewable on site is a much bigger investment initially, but again, then that's it's present within the business for a longer time. And within that, you probably have to schedule your maintenance if your insurance covers it and different things like that. But it's one of those like cost benefit analysis that might be worth doing for your organization. Another one is smart thermostats. So looking at how you can really manage your building in a more technology enabled way, sorry, there's no reason for an office that is empty, like say a particular office or part of your office. And if nobody's in there today, the heating should be compartmentalized and should be able to be turned off where it's not needed, and then obviously efficient where it is. Another thing which affects obviously food and drink supply, and I suppose some other things, but to the most, it's going to be more in the food supply chains, is refrigeration. But refrigeration is a massive energy sink. So even improving the efficiency of your insulation, um, looking at your temperatures and seeing if there's any way you could better manage your temperatures. Does it need to be that cold if you're in a warm place? Or if you're in a cold place, does it need to be that hot? Think about ambient temperatures, what the temperature is outside. If the temperature outside is the exact temperature that you need it to be, can you potentially have some looking at how your refrigeration could be a bit more reactive to what's happening around you, could save you so much money, could save percents, on your energy bill. And then also integrating a digital element for efficiency. So again, that's that modularization of, um, we can have the heating on in the canteen, but it only comes on like half an hour before lunch because it's a small room and it heats fast. We can have the heating on in the executive suite, but there's no point putting it on Fridays because they all work from home on a Friday. So there's little things like that, looking at the patterns of your business, looking at the patterns of your buildings, and then assessing it. And how can you do this yourself? Well, some cases you might want to do an audit. And I think an audit is a good place to start. And an audit doesn't have to be paying for a professional to come in, although obviously that might be best route for you. You could do it yourself. You can walk through a building and think, what in this room is not really working, what is not that efficient. If there is not good quality windows, I'm pointing to my own because I don't like them. They're very inefficient. If you have old equipment that you can clearly tell is not efficient. If that same equipment is breaking down often and you're having to spend your service contract like to the max, you're spending a lot of money with your service provider to get that fixed. What about stop spending the money with the service provider on maintaining the thing that is broken or that is getting older or is very inefficient, and look at ways in which you could potentially take that out of production and buy something that's more efficient. Again, I understand it can't be all the investments up front, but sometimes after the audit, you begin to realize that some of these opportunities are probably pretty good ones, and you might be safer going with that. Another key thing to do within the business is use meters, understand your usage, whether it is sensors on actual pieces of equipment, whether it is an understanding of different parts of your business. If you have more than one property or more than one office, comparing the two and seeing if there's any anomalies between them. Like, really get comfortable with the data and have a look through it. If it's not something that you're comfortable with, consider having that auditor do these sorts of comparisons. But it's about trying to think through what is going to work in terms of telling people what you've done, your marketing, your tendering, your positioning the company and the brand reputation on being more sustainable, but also what's going to work for the purse. Who's going to keep the accountant happy? So it's like trying to really integrate these things together, because as a small business, we can't afford the inefficiency of paying for one thing to look good, but actually wasting a lot of money in inefficiencies of not doing the real foundational work. And then in terms of reviewing the building, you're reviewing insulation, particularly roof insulation, ceiling insulation. Again, I know a company that never really thought to look in the roof space of their office building because it was rented. And when they did, they realized this is the reason why we're spending so much on our HVAC system. They insulated the roof themselves without asking the landlord to do it. They just did it because it made sense. And they've been able to, again, reduce those energy bills. In terms of water use, maybe putting on some sort of equipment. We'll obviously cover water use in a bit more detail in a minute. But really thinking about, like, if the local authority is charging you for water in and is charging you for water out, how can you make that cycle more efficient? And whether you use, you might use water in some of your um, processes, but is there a way, like, is that a clean process? Is the water afterwards, is it treatable? Could you use it then to service your black water? Could you use it for the toilets? How easy would that be to plumb? How easy would that be to change? Again, obviously, it's cost benefit analysis for these things. Looking at your temperature, you might have someone who's always cold who loves to keep the office really toasty. But if that means that two or three other people are leaving the windows open, you need to meet in the middle and to do what makes sense. And then appliances. So looking at the efficiency of all of your appliances, all of the things. So that is kind of just a quick overview of how energy can become more efficient, and how that can actually be a real no-brainer for your business. In terms of procurement, there's so many. There is so many. A little bit like my little example at the beginning. Buy local. It makes so much sense. It helps to build the authenticity of a brand. If you also not just buying local, but like really platforming other local businesses in a social media world, which is, sorry, not what this is about at all, but in the social media world, do you know the best way to get ranking and rating and kind of not blowing up? I'm not going to say it's going to blow up your Instagram, but the best way to get traction on social media is by tagging other people who are going to share your content. So if you do something with a local provider and you say, oh, wow, got new chairs, aren't these amazing? We actually had these custom made and carried off by the bespoke furniture company, and tag them. And they go, oh, thanks. Yeah, we work with this manufacturing company. We did their office fit out. We did this for them. Like, there's so much that you can kind of bring value to your local community and build relationships and build trust and build loyalty, and that's it's a win-win really. So there could be an initial expense if you are looking at your procurement, your supply, like what you're buying into the business, and saying, "Do you know what, we're not going to import, we're not going to do, or we're going to try not to, we're going to look at ways in which we can do this." There might be an initial expense to doing that. But for example, a client of ours, Deli Lights, are a fantastic local food company. They make sandwiches. They're based down in Mournepoint. They did their B Corp certification, which was incredible. It was such a good idea for them to do that. Whenever Brian was on stage at Enterprise Ireland, it was probably about 6 months ago, but he was on stage and someone said, "You've recently become B Corp. Was it worth it?" And he said, "Well, yeah, it was. It's a lot of hard work. There's a lot that goes into it. And there's a lot of reporting and things that kind of make it a little bit of a headache when you're doing the processes. But yeah, it really was worth it." And actually, I should shout out here as well, if you're looking for to do B Corp, Graham Gillen at eCount, ECCOUNT, is really, really wonderful. I was talking to him during the week, and he helps people with their B Corp certifications. But Brian said on stage, within a few days of having their B Corp certification, you go live on the website, and B Corp do like a little like, "Congratulations, Deli Lights are now B Corp. Welcome to the bunch." And one of the global airlines reached out to him, and or not to him, to one of the sales managers, and was like, "Hi, it's me from this massive airline, and we want better quality, business for good suppliers in our supply chain. So would you consider making sandwiches for our flights?" Like this is why I said at the beginning of this presentation, you can only be a pioneer once. When everybody's B Corp, there's no point. It's the expectation. It becomes the red tractor. Red tractor is like a health and safety standard on farms, but it becomes the thing that is just basic and assumed. And that's no good to businesses. If you're intending on doing it anyway, do it as quickly as you can, because differentiating yourself from your competitors by doing so can be really, really beneficial. So there's also resilience in our local supply chains, a little bit like we mentioned at the beginning of the energy part. We can import things, of course we can, but we also have international transport that is reliant on canals like the Panama Canal or the Suez Canal. And as we saw a year or two ago, whenever something was brought aground in the Suez Canal and shut the canal down until they could move the ship, there was a lot of people didn't have the things that they needed. There was a lot of people whose supply chains halted and stopped. And that's something that we can prevent from happening whenever we localize our supply chain. It also adds value to your brand. It implies quality because you're taking time to really consider where your things are coming from. And there's that loyalty because it is local impact. And everybody kind of wants to buy from their mates anyway. Do you know what I mean? So you can kind of relate to why that would be the case. Then when it comes to government incentives, I'm not sure if there's anywhere, like obviously there's people on the call today from anywhere in the world, so I'm not 100% sure, but quite often the government does incentivize for businesses to purchase from small businesses. Here in the UK, that actually comes under the social value element of public procurement. So you would be asked how many micro businesses are in your supply chain, how many. There's also a thing within public procurement that you can only work with organizations in a certain proximity. So it's like we are, like I am Farm and Carbon, and well, mine's a little bit different because it's services. I could literally work for anyone in the world. I could help someone in New Zealand as easily as I could help someone in Newton Abbey. But if I was a construction company, it would be something that it would be worthwhile pointing out that we use the services of people that are within 20-mile radius of this site, because obviously that reduces the transport emissions and things like that. And then there is definitely long-term benefits from greening up your supply chain. This is something that is interesting. Well, I think it's interesting, but organizations like Nestle at the minute, actually their stock prices have gone down, but they invested half of, don't totally quote me on this, but it's a really considerable amount. But in my understanding, it is half of their profits were reinvested into regenerative practices in their supply chain and supporting their supply chain to become more green, and I think some packaging innovation. And they were really trying to be involved with a lot of the things that were coming out of the Farm to Fork in the EU and the new, is it the new Green Deal or the European Green Deal? But Nestle were quite involved with that. Within regenerative agriculture, their name comes up fairly often, and their stock prices are down now, which might be because they've invested this big amount of money, or maybe they've, wound people up, or not everyone believes in what they've done. But actually, they're differentiating themselves from all of the other conglomerates because they are taking that chance and they are investing in the sustainability of the long-term supply, which I think is just interesting to note, that even some big players are really looking at how can we support the person at the very bottom of this. So within fashion, that would be like, how can we get away from inhumane working conditions? How can we prevent the textiles that we're using from causing massive water pollution? How can we step away from that? And then for the likes of food, it would be going to the farmer. How can we help support the farmer to become more efficient? How can we help improve environmental impact at a farm level? So it's definitely interesting. Some of the ways in which you could look at addressing your procurement that maybe you haven't already thought of, because obviously the main one would be the things that you're buying, pardon me, is a waste audit. So again, I'll use local examples, but if you're phoning from somewhere else or if you're attending from somewhere else, please comment below and I would be more than happy to jump on a call with you to try to find the same kind of initiatives in your area. But we have some incredible waste management organisations here. One, which I'll start with, is the Northern Ireland Resource Network. Through that network, it's examples of best practice, it's examples of circularity, real circularity, and also reducing waste, but platforming. If an organization in the Northern Ireland Resource Network was doing something really innovative, they have a podcast, they highlight it on the website, they do blog posts, like they really try to show off what people are doing. Some of those organizations include the likes of Recon. So Recon are a waste management company in Armagh or Craigavon, and I think they're in Craigavon actually, and they do street cleaning, but they take the particles, all the little stones and things and the dirt that they've pulled off the street cleaning, and they actually turn it back into a soil product, which can be sold then, which I think is incredibly innovative. It helps keep the streets clean, which obviously is important for drainage. It's important for the look of the place. But yeah, it's also incredibly valuable that they can turn it into something beyond that. So it's not going to landfill, it's not going anywhere else. And then it's an oldie, but it's a goodie. They're so good. International Synergies. They, I feel like I mention them all the time, but they're an organization that I really, really stand by. I think they've got such good values. They would come in, help you to understand what your waste is. And they also want to understand what your input requirements are. So if your input requirement was sand, for example, and what you had to put out was 5 foot sheets of glass that don't really fit, say you're a window maker or a glass maker. So you need sand, but your output is if they're misshapen, you can't really do anything with them. So, which is maybe not a really good example, because obviously I do know that in that case you would just break the glass back down again, use it again as sand. But for talk's sake, you have a product that you need to make the product that you sell, and you sell a certain volume of that product, and then you have a degree of waste. They come in, they look at your waste, they look at what you need, and they try to pair you with local businesses. So, a really good example, again, I talk about it all the time, a PVC window maker here in Northern Ireland couldn't get the specific plastic that they needed for the insulation of the PVC windows during COVID. It was getting really hard to get. Whenever they did the assessment, they realized that specific plastic is actually what was used in COVID masks. So obviously he wasn't going to be able to get it for the same price as he used to. So they were like, do you touch the product directly? Do you need, like, could we hypothetically use COVID masks? And he was like, yeah, I don't touch it. It all goes into a process. I don't have to touch it. So they organized with a health authority, like the local health. I'm trying to. It's not council. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Like the district health representatives, to collect the COVID masks as a separate waste rather than with the rest of the clinical waste. And they went through then a secondary process of steaming them to make sure that there was not any germs or anything. And then he was able to use recycled COVID masks as insulation for PVC windows. I think that is an incredible example of how we can simultaneously save money, become more efficient, have a good news story, have people bought into our product, because that is a really, really cool story, and also be in line with these sustainability standards. So I am conscious of the time, so I'm going to move on to water. Oh yeah, and sorry, one last little thing to mention on procurement. Whenever we're talking about localizing supply chains, this is something that I literally have set up my business for. I do think that it's really important that when we're making environmental impact, and when we're like as a business doing this is something that, we want people to pat ourselves on the back for, it has to be something that impacts the people that you want to pat you on the back. The people that feel the benefits of any environmental impact projects or any environmental negligent projects are those within a immediate vicinity of it. So if an organization told me that they were planting thousands of trees in Norway, I would say, why? Like, why? Why would you not be doing something here? Why would you not be helping with water pollution mitigation, with supporting so many ways in which we could look at environmental impact here? Whereas if you're investing elsewhere and it's not very fair in those communities. And Norway is one example. That's probably privately owned land. That's probably a timber company, to be fair. Whenever you go elsewhere, what is often positioned as really good impact on local communities, whenever we're maybe going to the global south or parts of Africa, or planting trees in a place that maybe you don't really recognize, quite often those projects are actually not very ethical. They could be pricing people off the land. They could be pushing farmers out. They could be affecting the local security of their food supply chain. And unless something that the founder, that it's happening, I would seriously warn businesses against investing into things like that, because it can be really ethically questionable. And for the likes of Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Shell, there's a few really big organizations, and they were throwing money at this a few years ago, only to find out that those projects that they were sponsoring were basically stealing the land, and it actually ends up being not something that's beneficial for your reputation. So look for local impact and make local impact in terms of your environmental impact. So yes, water. um I feel like I need to breathe. I'm gonna have a sip of water. Speaking of water, um a little aside, someone said to me last week, the reason that we don't do something is the exact reason it should be a priority. So if you think sustainability sounds great, but I don't want to do it because it costs too much, it's going to cost you more in the future, because you're not planning, you're not incorporating it in. Or if you're like, oh, sustainability, yeah, I don't want to do something like ruffle the feather of my customers. It's like, if you start to look at marketing trends or consumer analysis or looking at who actually buys your product, I think that's a really important thing. Sometimes people don't want to. So if a business owner maybe is of a different generation from who buys their product, um, they kind of assume that they feel how I feel, and that in those situations it is very worthwhile to actually understand what your market wants, because um, that's what organizations have had to do whenever their primary source of income has been public procurement or government procurement. They need to quickly move with what the government is focusing on and where that the boundaries are for that. If you sold to millennials, efficiency, green, eco, sustainability, all of these things are actually trigger points. And contrary to, so overall, consumers generally don't spend more money. They're still, driven by price, until you break down into the market segments and you realize that the proportions of the market, but more than half of millennials are actually willing to spend a premium on, whether that is paying extra for coffee, for the coffee to be fair trade, or paying extra for. So it's like really trying to think about who you're trying to relate to. Anyway, we'll move on to water. So it is our most precious resource here in Northern Ireland. Obviously, we've had a big conversation about water. People elsewhere might have also heard about this, but the biggest lake. It's called the Loch. So, but it's the biggest lake in the UK, and it is experiencing turmoil because of problems with pollution, invasive species, temperature change, and all of this has kind of created a chemical imbalance in the water, which has led to algae blooms. But algae blooms are cyclical, and they're very problematic actually when they die, not when they're alive. Well, they're problematic when they're alive too, because they're toxic and they can kill dogs, and they're toxic to people too. But when it dies, it goes to the bottom of the lake and basically suffocates anything that lives there. It just through the decomposition and the methane and things that it emits when it is decomposing. And because the bottom of the lake is apoxic, is that the word? It's low in oxygen. The animals that are built to live there are okay with low oxygen, but they're not alive with no oxygen. So it could, like, it's one of those things that keeps getting worse and worse. And I think as businesses, it would be best just to really, really be proactive with this. Use as little water as you can, and proactively protect the water resources that are near to you. So, for example, I mentioned earlier about the retailers. There's this thing called the the Retailer Net Zero Collaborative Action Programme, and that is underwritten by the RAP Core Told Commitment. And within that commitment, this is just sustainability all over, but within that commitment, water stewardship is a massive part of it, as well as your carbon efficiency, your healthy supply chains, and your packaging. So water is something that is as important as everything else that we're talking about, but water is often just sort of taken for granted. We do focus on carbon within sustainability, and I do think that it is so important to recognize it is much more multifaceted than that. So what you can do in your business, I didn't focus too much on the problem because I feel like we've been absolutely, I was going to say polluted with it, and I don't mean that, but I do. It's been a lot. We're talking about water a lot here. So what you can do in your business to reduce water usage, fixtures to slow the water flow, um, training your staff, turning the taps off, having taps in your bathroom that don't stay on. I think it's a pretty old school um thing where you push the button on the tap, but you can't release the button again. But like fixing something like that could cost £200 across the whole business, and all of your taps would be more efficient. And I think it's just like those little things that all added together could make a big difference. Then there's also innovations like Wizzo. I'm part of the Ulster Bank Accelerator, and another innovator that was part of it as well created a product that you just drop in the toilet and it completely neutralizes it. So there's no odor, no smell, no staining, nothing. Like it just, you drop this tablet in and it's all natural ingredients. The one consumer or citizen behavior change that would be required is disposing of your toilet roll in a basket or in a bin. So obviously that's like a small thing to change, but I like, imagine your business didn't have to flush the toilet unless it was a number two. Like that is quite a lot of flushing saved. Other ways we could save water is rainwater harvest. If anyone wants to find out more about Wizzo, comment, give me a message, send me an email, info@farmingcarbon.co.uk. I would be more than happy to connect you with him. But yeah, rainwater harvest, so simple. It is so simple. This is one that farmers that I work with do, because rainwater is actually better in terms of farm usage, because it's not as sterilized, it's not as processed. It just makes sense for them to do it, and it also means that they're not being charged for the water in because they're harvesting rainwater. But having the capacity to harvest rainwater also means that you're got like, so for example, if you were in an area that's on the cusp of a floodplain, potentially you don't really want your gutter, like any problems with your drainage to exacerbate the problem with the flooding. Whereas if you had another place to put it, like a tank or something, and that could potentially even do like, flooding is complex because obviously it depends entirely on where your business is, but there is potential that rainwater harvesting could be part of the solution for your flood mitigation plan. Recycling water. So again, this is really cool one for food processors. Recycling your rainwater is a really innovative way in which you can reduce your burden on the water utility provider. Maintenance, plant maintenance is same with the energy efficiency one, looking for areas and like doing some sort of system. And the system can be as simple as having one of your graduates go and track all your pipes outside, all your external pipes, making sure that there's no leaks and any leaks are prevented before they become problems. Looking at your cooling systems and how do they work? Do they need upgraded? Are they as efficient as they possibly can be? And is there any like disrespect to the water that we're using? And then process, so your optimization of your processes as well. So water stress affects 1/4 of the world's population. And just because we are in the 3/4 that it doesn't affect at the minute, doesn't mean that we get a free pass to just waste it. And I think that's something, it's like we measure things that we care about, and what gets measured gets improved. And sometimes we don't even have a meter on the water to understand our usage. And I think that is something where, just within the values of your business, if you want to be a part of the more sustainable future, you have to really live by the values. There's no other option because it just doesn't work otherwise. It's too much effort to put in if it's not something that you're gonna stick with. So I think, considering that if we check that statistic, I made it 1 in 4 people. 1 in 4 people that lives is affected by water stress. And that is something that could even inform our decisions when we're in the supermarket. For example, In countries like Morocco, in Spain, in France, Spain and France more so now that there have been extremely hot summers and droughts, but Morocco has been experiencing this for a lot longer time. We buy our fruit and our vegetables from areas that are experiencing chronic water stress. How unfair is it that the water that should have been for that community is actually being transported to be sold as a tomato in Sainsbury's, and that we buy that tomato and then we can't even be bothered to cook it, and it goes mushy and rubbish, and we throw it in the bin. Like this is the like, and obviously there's I'm a big environmentalist. Like I love this stuff, but it is incredible how we could just reflect a little bit more and think a little bit more and not do that. If you're going to go to the effort of improving your water efficiency in the building, why not by extension pass that out into the other areas of not your life. I don't want to say your life. Obviously, I don't want to tell anyone they have to eat a certain way, but I do just think it's worth considering that like a quarter of the world is under this stress, and we so blissfully ignorantly make decisions every day that continue to exacerbate those conditions for people all over the place. Which brings us on to our next topic. Again, do you know what? I made a coffee before this began, and I haven't even had a sip. Cold coffee. That's great. Cool. So transport. Transport is something that so many people would think, well, not so many people, but a lot of organizations might think, we don't really need that. You know, if logistics isn't part of your operations or your service provision, or you don't own any lorries, potentially you might think, this doesn't really matter. But it does. Particularly within the scopes. So referring back to SBTI once more, the scoped emissions, scope 1 is what you do in your building, in your own organization, like not the organization, let's say in the building that you run your organization from. Scope 2 is your electricity, because although you use that in the building that you occupy, electricity is slightly different because where you get your electricity from could vary quite massively, whereas how you heat the building, if you're heating it with oil, there's approximately the same carbon conversion for that. So electricity is separate and it's in scope 2. And then scope 3 is everything else that it takes to run your business. And it includes downstream emissions and upstream emissions. So downstream emissions are, pardon me, downstream emissions are everything that it takes to get what you need to fulfill your processes to you. And then upstream is what it takes to get the product that you have now created to where you want it to get to, right through to the end of life. So what happens whenever it is redundant or finished with? How quickly does the person or business dispose of this? So it's really it's very, very detailed. But 2 parts of transport come in, actually 3, but we'll do 3. 3 parts of transport come into this. So there's one is your supply chain. So whenever it's how you get the things to you, and the assets that you use within the business. So that's looking at company cars. Who has one? Who needs one? Does it have to be a car? Could it be if you live in a city, could it be a rail card? Could it be your Oyster card if you live in London? Like, does it have to be a car? Is a car necessary? And if a car is necessary, cars are available on finance to businesses. So what's the trade-off of using the car that you have, maybe a diesel car, and an EV? Is an EV possible? And don't get me wrong, EVs aren't the cure to the end, like to everything, but I do think it's important to consider their role within that element of your business. Another thing that you could potentially do is carbon budgets. So if traveling for work is necessary, if there's a lot of conferences or a lot of like going and meeting clients in different places, could you develop a carbon budget So again, you don't just pull it out of the air. You look at how many flights have been paid for on the company card in the last 2 years. Who's taken those flights? Is it the sales team? Is it the executive team? Is it the marketing team? If it's the marketing team, could they potentially, if that's going to other suppliers, like how much of that could have been scaled back into um, Zoom calls or digital meetings? Or if it is your executive team, do they need, like, obviously face to face is sometimes essential for business. I'm not taking that away, but do they need to make a flight? Is it possible that it could be incorporated into time off and they could take trains across? Is there any other way? And the thing is, the businesses need to understand their usage and become more efficient as much as possible. But then there is also offset what you can't replace. So it's not, at no point does it say you can never ever travel again. That's not what this is about. So having a carbon budget would mean that potentially your executive team has an allowance for one long haul flight and three short haul flights a year for business reasons. Your sales team maybe has the same. I'm not sure, but it's like challenging people that they have a limit and there's a cap on that, and that they should be trying to minimize that wherever possible. At the same time, delivering the what they need to for the business. But really, I think that a lot of times you can still have very valuable relationships. You can still work with people from all over the world, but it's just as accessible to do that virtually. And in terms of your employee well-being and their availability for their family and their work-life balance, it makes sense for that too. So trying to virtualize where possible. And then I mentioned it earlier, but the physical proximity in relation to services. So if you're based somewhere and you have a lot of subcontractors, really trying to find subcontractors that are within your local area or within a capped area, so that when you're reporting on it, when you're talking about it, or when you're having that conversation about what you do to be sustainable, you can say, we do XYZ, we have reduced our energy, or we have reduced our energy emissions or our energy usage by XYZ. And we also have been able, like, we only deal with subcontractors within a 15-mile radius from our offices. It's just another thing to show that you have metrics to improve and that you can become more efficient when possible. Another part of transport, I'll go for the less obvious one, is how your employees get to work. So actually offering a flexible working package is not only better for your employees in terms of, well, if that's what they want, but it gives greater accessibility for example, for mothers returning to work. It gives better accessibility for people who maybe are experiencing chronic illnesses or chronic problems, but they still want to work. Maybe just the commute or the transport or the driving was the problem. And there's lots of people that have conditions that affect their ability to drive, but it doesn't affect their ability to work. And then also considering, is your office walkable? Is there anyone who could walk to your office? Is active travel an option? And if active travel is an option, could the business help your not your audience, your employees, to partake in active travel initiatives in coming to work? So there's so many things which you could do to kind of support your employees to reduce their carbon footprint of coming to work. Potentially that will make them healthier, make them happier, and help them to fulfill a better work-life balance. And then we also have our upstream logistics. So this is, how does your product get from where you have it to where it needs to be? Someone who's massively disrupted this is Deliveroo with their bikes. So the fact that in the city centre, in most cities, that they're, or sometimes beyond the city centre, but that there are bike couriers, they are not spending money on parking. They are not wasting money on fuel. They are not getting stuck in traffic. They are not as bound by, for example, if I was getting a pizza delivered and a car had to find a car parking space, and get the pizza to me, there's a chance that that might not go that easily for them, and that the efficiency of the drivers would be reduced. Whereas if he has it in a heat box on the back of his bike and he's able to cycle to the door, there's a lot more control over that, in terms of well, reducing the emissions, but also I think it's just quite innovative. It's obviously not applicable if you make bricks for your business, but and then also looking at last mile delivery options. So that is where you take it to a hub like near the city or close to the city, but looking at alternative ways to actually get your product to the end user, that don't involve unloading or big lorries or taking up, a certain part of a truck whenever you're only using like a third of it or a quarter of it or something. Um, Looking at your facilities team facilitating flexible arrivals and departures in terms of logistics. So again, if you have a city centre location, um, could they do it early? Could they do it before the morning traffic starts? Could they do it late? Or would it be possible to do these kind of things in low traffic times rather than standing, like the truck or the lorry, waiting and idling and obviously emitting every minute that it's on. And then looking at some alternative options for your transport and logistics. So we here in Northern Ireland, we have McCullough driving biomethane trucks, massively publicised by Lidl who use them, but they are doing fantastic work. They have an AD on plant. We also have the likes of TransLink who have invested massively in hydrogen buses. Could that hydrogen technology go into logistics? Is that a potential? And then just really looking at what's available in your market, what's relevant to you, and then optimizing your supply chain efficiency. So we ordered in my own house, we ordered 4 things from Amazon the other day because we needed them to be delivered the next day, and they arrived in 4 vans. And I thought, how, why would 4 different vans need to come here and bring me 4 small boxes if they had a more efficient system? That and actually 2 were from the same supplier. Like they'd come in the same place and somehow been separated along the way. They're obviously individually labeled and addressed, and they arrived in our house in 4 different vans, which is just not ideal. And really looking at how your supply chain could be more efficient could definitely pay dividends economically and environmentally. And then lastly, technology for visibility. So if you have like Amazon, a very complex supply chain, or not supply, but like, very complex delivery system in which use technology. And obviously they do. And I'm really not getting at them, but it was interesting. I thought, how was that possible? But you can definitely mitigate that from happening in your own business. And then and then we're on to the last one. I am sure I'm not the only person who is relieved that it's great. And do you know what? I really, really appreciate that you are here on the call, that you're listening and taking it in. I'm sure there has to be some part of this that works for you that will help your business to improve and potentially improve simultaneously in terms of economics and environmental impact. But yeah, there's so much to it, and it really can be quite confusing whenever you're just hearing the standards and the letters and all of these things. It gets overwhelming. And actually, I was supposed to say it at the start when I introduced myself, but I didn't. But I wrote a book on just trying to make this easier. It's not small businesses are just expected to get it and react and know exactly what to do. And as I say, 600 initiatives and things. Most of them are acronyms as well, so they just spell out random stuff. It's hard to even remember which letters. But I do have an element of this called the alphabetic spaghetti of ESG. I don't have all 600. I just have the main ones that apply here, for organizations, and really trying to outline why sustainability matters. But yes, we'll move on to employees. Employees are obviously the lifeblood of many organizations. You need to ensure that their basic needs are met. That is a legal requirement of every organization. But when it comes to trying to change culture or embed something into your business that you haven't previously, trying to bring your employees on board can be hard. And there can be an ambition of the senior leadership team potentially to think, why would we even tell them? Sure, they're not going to care. It's not going to make a difference. It's not going to change their job. But it does. Because if you're saying that as a business, you are committed to water efficiency, as a business, we are going to make sure that our energy efficiency is improved. Do you know who the best placed people to tell you before you do the audits, before you hire the professionals? Like literally, they work there every day, and particularly in factories or in wholesale processes, they will be able to tell you the machines that are breaking down the most, the taps that are leaking the most, the pipes that leak the most often, because they're seeing it all the time. And involving people in the conversation before it becomes a thing doesn't mean that you have to do everything that they suggest or recommend. And it doesn't mean that they have to be as bought into the process as your senior management team. But it does mean that you give them the opportunity to weigh in, to understand, to feel acknowledged, and to potentially save you the bother of having to do that really in-depth auditing part with like missing it. Like if you walk past it and the pipe had been fixed yesterday, but it had been fixed 6 times in the last 3 months, and you walk past in a day that it was working fine, you might not realize that that would be best place to start. Um, so there's loads of ways you can engage with your employees. Depends entirely on the structure of your business. If you do things like morning meetings, drop it into conversation. Ask for feedback. Ask, does anyone feel strongly about this? Does anyone want to weigh in? And just see who's there, see who's got an opinion on it. And then you can also do things like Google Forms or any other form creating software and just send it out. Send it out 2 hours before they normally get their payslip when they are looking for your emails, because in case they maybe don't check their emails very often. And then there's something that I do with some of the clients that I work with that I think is a really valuable thing to do. When you're asking your employees for feedback on the processes and on the general business improvements, ask them what matters to them. Ask them which environmental impact projects would they be happy to see done with the company budget for that. Ask them what charities would they like to see supported. Ask them what local initiatives do they know of that we could potentially support as a business. And this is a fantastic way to resonate with your local community, to improve recruitment opportunities, to show your employees that you're listening, and to see if having a Christmas jumper day, like with no real outcome to it, do you know what I mean? Like, not to say everyone needs to pay like a lot of money, but like £1 per person for a Christmas jumper day is normally a pretty standard requirement in primary school. But we sort of forget that like these things are really easy to do. And you could even do it like everyone, we're gonna do a collection for the local homeless. Say we're doing it at Christmas time and we're doing it for an organization that supports homeless people around Christmas so that they have a nice festive period and they're kind of protected from the cold and have something warm to eat. You could do that and say, okay, everybody, we're going to have a Christmas jumper day. Everyone bring in and donate to the charity, and the business will match whatever, like the total of what everybody gives, because that'll make everyone a little bit more generous. And it's really, really easy things, but rather than just doing something that doesn't resonate with them, ask them how they feel about it. And that's not to say that every single person's charity has to be acknowledged. It The way it worked in my experience is that 12 people mentioned one specific charity. And in their case, it was the Kevin Bell Trust, which is an incredibly personal thing. It helps families, bereaved families, who have a member of their family that has died when they're away somewhere else and they don't know how to get them home. And the Kevin Bell Repatriation Trust helps to bring them home. By acknowledging the importance of that charity to many people in their organisation, that did more. It went further. It's the same action as giving that exact amount to a local charity of any other kind, but this one actually made their employees feel good about it. So I know that's not specifically related to sustainability, but quite often it can be, because what comes up for your employees might be the river protection, like grassroots group. It might be, it might be something like that. It might be a youth group. It might be something for a particular illness that someone in the team had that you maybe didn't think to put the two together. And it's a really nice way to sort of develop out your social impact. So while environmental impact is obviously very, very massively a part of sustainability, another part of it is also the social impact. And the social impact is how you relate to and resonate with all of the people that are relevant to your business. So that's your employees, your customers, the communities around you, and the stakeholders or the shareholders in your actual organization as well. So yeah, I think you just need to have a very well-rounded outlook on all of this. And sustainability, I've been posting a lot in the lead up to this webinar and trying to increase my presence online. And I have had some certain people comment underneath things and being like, well, sustainability or carbon, it's just another tax. What's the point? This is all just part of some big agenda, and it's just for the tax. It's just to squash the small person. And I actually completely disagree, because the version of sustainability that's really gatekept, and you need to have 400 accreditations, you need to have this and you need to have that, and if you don't have this sparkly little star, then you're no good at all. That's not sustainability. And that's not what most organizations or procurement processes are asking you for. Sustainability is looking at the efficiency of your business and how you will continue to provide a secure business. Does that make sense? How you'll continue to be sustained, essentially. So on that note, I kind of like just buffed out a little part that sort of came up for me in the last few days. Like, even if implementing sustainability only reduced your bills, or even if it only engaged your employees, or it only improved air quality in the immediate vicinity of your factory or your business, if it only did any of these things, it would probably still be worth it. But like, it doesn't. It's also a way to support local business. And if it was only a way to support local business, I can see why some people might be like, well, that's not really enough. But this is about supporting and your employees, providing a better quality product for your customers, having your customers know the effort that you're putting into this so that you're better positioned for tenders, improving the resources within the business so that we're not wasting water, so that we can respect the other places in the world that don't have water to waste, and that we can kind of take that same energy with how we use water and how we use energy and how we use these things in our organizations. So becoming more sustainable obviously is, there's lots and lots of reasons why you want to do it. You're already ahead by the fact that you're here and listening and watching. And I suppose just very quickly before I finish the call, although this is 100% not a sales call, I will just outline what we do. If you want anything else from me, please just click the Calendly link below and we can arrange a conversation. But I'll just overview some of the things we do. So as I've mentioned once, although I should have mentioned it twice, I have written a book. It is called ESG Made Easy. It is written for businesses to understand how sustainability can become a competitive advantage. It's available on Amazon or directly through my website. For the ebook version, again, if you want the physical copy, let me know. I can set up that. I don't have so many of the printed ones, but I can definitely post you one. If you want to purchase it through the other version, and anyway, we can organize that, no problem. And then we also have partnered with a carbon management software, which is really incredible. If you're trying to apply for SBTI, for B Corp, for any of the environmental standards, or trying to be in line with your industry in some way, 100% this will have you covered. So it's called Greenly. I have an exclusive link underneath. Again, don't book it straight with them. Come to me and I'll see if I can get you a wee bit knocked off. And then also consultancy. So that is what I do. If you need help with understanding what your sustainability strategy might look like, with thinking how does this apply in my industry? What is happening in my industry? Because sometimes industries are undergoing such change that it's hard to know whether you should pause and do nothing, or how you could prepare yourself to do. It's kind of difficult to navigate, and I do appreciate that. So if you wanted to have a chat about what that might look like for you and how we might be able to help you, when we're talking about the employees, I did mean to mention, when you give your employees the opportunity to give you feedback, there's actually a Japanese thing called Kaizen, which is continual feedback or continual efficiency, and that's only gained through conversation. Like get the people who are actually doing it every day telling you how it works, telling you what isn't working and what is. And one of my really appreciated clients, Allstate Insurance. I think we might have some people from there on the call today, hopefully, or maybe we'll catch them on the replay. But what they do is that they empower a group called Allstate Green, and their green group, on behalf of the whole business, do incredible projects. They have helped Farm and Carbon to facilitate. We did tree planting. We had a lovely day tree planting out on a farm in County Down. We have done trees for schools, which I actually have right here. This is just by chance. I did not mean to do this. But yeah, we went in and we told the children stories about all of these incredible trees. This one is a magic tree. This one is like a superhero. Oh, this one is a king, you might be able to tell. And she's like a fashionista doctor. And he's just a cool dude, to be fair. So the things that can be facilitated by empowering your employees and letting them do these things is amazing. And then obviously we also just help businesses. We just help to get to sort of navigate where the next thing is. Not everyone is going to be a consultancy client. Not every business is going to need that. So the best thing to do, have a chat, have a call, and we'll see if it's a right fit, if it's something that you want to do. But yeah, other than that, this has been great. I suppose I could quickly share one of the stories of the tree planting project that we did do. So that's it. As you can probably tell, if we think about ESG, environmental, social, and governance, these tree planting projects are a fantastic way to commit to environmental impact, because we're planting trees, social impact, because I'm going in and teaching children what these trees are, what they'll grow into, what little animals will live in them, where the folklore and the stories around them came from, and then like just sort of making it magical. And really, when we make nature magical for young people, that can breathe inspiration into their their choices as they grow. But we did have one little boy who planted the trees with. It was again in County Down, and I had worked with the Young Enterprise in this same school, so I knew this particular class really well. And so we came in, did the presentation, told them all about the trees, and they were so chuffed. And this little boy came up to me at the end and he said, Steph, thank you so much. Like, I really, really love the oak tree. I love Owen the oak tree. And I was like, that's so good. And he was like, thank you for giving me another thing I can love, like my dog. Like, I think nature is so cool. Thank you. Like, this kid must have said thank you like 5 times. And then he gave me the biggest hug. And I was just, it really moved me because I thought, like, this is the reason why we're doing it. We're doing all this for a better future. We're doing it for cleaner air, cleaner water, more wildlife, for businesses to be showcased and do the right things and really resonate with the communities that they exist in, and for those communities to rally around the business as well. And there really can be a synergy between the two. So I am absolutely chuffed that you were here, you were able to make it. I would love to speak to as many people as possible. If you want to just give me I'll share the link on Calendly. Just book yourself in, and I would be absolutely delighted to continue the conversation to see if there's any way in which I can help you, and from there see if there's any way in which we can work together. But yeah, thank you. Have a great day. Enjoy your weekend, and peace out. Ciao. Oh dear. Oh, I tried to look so cool and now I can't in the stream.